country, probably 20 million people. And, you know, that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
Moving his spear. Hold. When you're ready. On you. Ready. Move. Move.
As now virtually everybody in the Western world knows, President Donald Trump had an assassination attempt last Saturday, which kind of really rocked the political world. It has just turned things upside down. And as we're trying to discuss or discover exactly what happened, a lot of things are already not lining up. And so there's a lot of curiosity about some of the facts, which we're going to get into a lot. I've got two great folks to help us analyze that today. We have Tony Shaffer, who's the president of Project Sentinel and the host of the Hard Truth podcast, and ever popular Matt Ho, former State Department official, combat Marine. Guys, welcome to the show, first of all. Hey, good to be here. Always great to join you, Danny. And man, it sounds odd to say, hey, well, I'm glad to have you both here. This is going to have a great show. But the subject matter is about the most sobering one we can even get. So it's just really odd. But, one of the things we do, the whole reason we have Deep Dive is because we want to, go underneath the headlines and find out actually what's happening here. And there's a lot of things that just really are not lining up to me. So before we even get into any of the details, first of all, I'd just like, you guys' impression. Let me specifically, what was the first thing that entered your mind when you heard the news of this? Tony, we'll start with you.
Well, I was actually driving on, Matt knows where this is, Highway 17 here on the eastern part of the state. And Australian TV called me, the Today Show. And they said, hey, can you come on? I'm a contributor, full disclosure. I work for them. I'm a contributor to Channel 9. I don't have the Australian accent, but they like me anyway. Who'd have thought? But I actually was on, and they said, hey, Trump was just shot. I was shocked. It's like, what? It's like, can you pull over right now? We need to have you come on. So my first viewing of this, Danny, was actually commenting on it. I was actually shown it as I was asked to comment on it. And I said, that's 556. Those reports, those are sharp. That's from some distance. I said half a mile. I was wrong, but it was 150 meters. And it was clearly someone took a shot at it. This was from a high position, probably a building. And so my initial assessment turned out to be pretty good. But I was just shocked. Now, my thinking about who was behind it, well, the timing of this could not be better because to distract from Joe Biden's serial failures. And I love the conspiracy world out there already. They're saying, oh, Trump did this. This is a false flag. It's like, why would Trump do this when he's already beaten the pants off Biden? Or the depends, depending on one's perspective. But in any case, this was a legitimate effort by someone. And I'm saying someone as in like there's more than one to be behind this. So that's my initial assessment. I think there was this kid they're going to portray it as a lone gunman. It's not lone. At a minimum, he was inspired by others. And I think there's more to it than that.
Yeah, we're going to certainly get into that. Matt, what was your first thought when you first heard the news?
Well, hey, first, it's good to be with you both. It's good to see you, Tony. It's been a little while.
Matt, I've seen you.
Yeah. And similar. I saw it on Twitter. I was scrolling through Twitter, wasting my life, and I saw something about someone shooting at Trump. And I was kind of like, what kind of nonsense is this? And then it struck me of like, wait, hang on. Why hasn't someone shot at Trump before? And so my line of thought watching it, holy cow, how close he came from being killed. The same thing as Tony. I recognize that snap of a 5.56 round, or I guess a 2.23 round. And, all those types of things. And I go back to what Tony just said there. I don't think there was anyone involved in this other than the shooter directly. But the inspiration for this, how could this have not occurred? The Democrats have spent a decade and hundreds of millions of dollars promoting Donald Trump as an existential threat to the United States. They have declared him as treasonous, as a traitor, as under the control of foreign governments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He is the personification of what our Constitution calls out of enemies, foreign and domestic. And so the fact that it took this long for somebody to take a shot at him as this kid did is what's kind of surprising to me, because this is what else will we expect to have happened? What else could have come from this? And I wrote a piece earlier today, Danny, I know you saw it, where this dovetails exactly with, if you're going to say that we have to send $175 billion to Ukraine to defend democracy, have this proxy war where hundreds of thousands have been killed to defend democracy, if you're going to support a genocide in Gaza because Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, if you're going to send us to Iraq and Afghanistan to take part in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom, right? It's all about democracy. And then you make the same arguments that this man is an existential threat to our democracy. Again, the fact that it was only now that someone took a shot at him is really surprising to me.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of tag in there. My first thought when this happened, when I first heard about it, was very similar to yours. I'm like, I guess it finally happened. I guess it was slightly different than that, because I had a meeting with somebody who was a former Trump administration official 4 or 5 months ago. It's been quite a while now. And I remember that we were talking about, as things get closer to the election, what might we expect to see? And one of the things that he mentioned was, he said they had some concerns, some people that I guess some of them are still with the Trump campaign. They said they were concerned that there might be an assassination attempt, because he's got so many enemies. Not just some of the obvious one, the Biden administration per se, but there's also the so-called deep state, however defined, that there's lots of people who don't want to see a second Trump. You also have the issue with the Slovakian president who had an assassination attempt in May, because he was wanting to bring that war to an end. Trump is avidly wanting to bring that war to an end. So I'll just say right off the top here, folks, that there is so much we do not know. But I want to talk about some of the things that we do know and some big red flags that I've seen. Tony, you had something to say?
So, well, regarding the context of the overall direction of things, and I love being on with Matt. Matt and I started off in the old days on the Dylan Radigan show working together. And I think Matt shares my nostalgia by the fact that we got together and just talked about facts as they are, not as we wanted them to be. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of our continued relationship. We don't agree politically on everything, but I think we recognize we all must find and agree upon facts.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we're going with our discussion today, is the facts. We don't have to interpret
exactly
the facts. We can just say point. So to the point, I think it's very important that the larger context here matters. What I'd wanted to talk to you about, Danny, before this happened over the weekend, is your brilliant, and I'm not saying it's because you're my friend, your brilliant analysis of Joe Biden's speech and activities at the NATO summit. I was blown away by the way you laid it out factually. So I just want to put that out there for your audience. I thought we were going to talk about NATO, but obviously this happened over the weekend. But my point is that NATO stuff, that Biden stuff matters to what happened. They don't want Trump back. And the fact is, the Biden administration's turned the Ukrainian issue into a cash cow for both their causes domestically and the progressive left or the globalists internationally. This is a business, and that business, my friend, has to do with the politicians currently in power not wanting to give it up. That's why the assassination attempt in Europe, arguably, I'm not saying that the U.S. government had a role, but one of the facts I'm going to mention here is, and Matt knows this, you knows this, 3 minutes in combat is a long time. When you have a weapon being presented clearly in view of a target 150 meters away, 3 minutes is a long time. And so we have to establish why it took Secret Service literally having a bead on a guy with an AR in his hand and not taking the shot rapidly. I was at the Chesapeake, Virginia rally a little over 2 weeks ago. It's on my Instagram. You guys can go check it out. T-Spooky. It's all there. I was a special guest up in front. I got to see Trump, and I'm a member of law enforcement in Virginia. But even as a member of law enforcement, I had to go through 5 separate checkpoints to get to where I needed to be. And then once I got there, you had to go through the Secret Service screening. So it was very thorough. Governor Youngkin was there too. So there was very clearly overlapping and continuous law enforcement jurisdictional integration or a tapestry of law enforcement. Danny and Matt, I don't think that happened in Pennsylvania. And you got to ask yourself, why didn't that happen when, clearly this kid was allowed to get very close, 150 meters. Come on, guys. We could hit with iron sights something at 150 meters based on our basic training. So This is not rocket science.
Now, I want to kind of detail that because I'm actually going to lay some of those details out and show some graphic depictions of exactly how long there was available. And one of the video clips I'm going to show you it just seems like a really long time to really underscore your comment about how long it is. And I'm going to do that on purpose because it does raise some real questions. Because in my assessment, at least as of this early moment here, is that either there was gross incompetence on the part of this whole Secret Service team or something else may be going on. We don't know yet. I don't have enough information to speculate even what that might be, but there are some big red flags. Let me show you some of them. First of all, here's a diagram of the facility here, which is very important to note because some of these are going to come back up later in some of these other videos. So you've probably seen some of this. This is one of the best ones that I've seen to where you can see both where the spectator was killed, where Trump was standing, where the gunman was located, the line of sight you see in the kind of the lower center there where the Secret Service sniper is that you're going to see on some of these videos also. And you just see that everything is set up here to where, man, everything in the world should have said, we're going to identify this guy early and at the very least protect the president. Even if you didn't want to take the shot before you knew for sure that that was a lethal threat, you couldn't possibly take a risk on that. It wouldn't seem, and I want you guys to speak on this in just a second. But as we look at these videos so I'm sorry. That's how I want to set this up. So we may come back to this, Gary. So kind of have this ready to come up there because after some of these other videos, I want to bring that back to show what we had. But first of all, even I want to talk about one of the things that may be responsible for Trump even being alive right now is doing something that he doesn't normally do. Watch this reporter, this from a CNN hit here from someone who was on the ground right next to him, who's covered a lot of Trump rallies. Watch this.
When you watch him at a rally, he always looks forward. Always looks forward. He never looks to his right or to his left. And he had put a screen up that showed a chart. Also never does charts. And he looked to his right, something he never does. And as he looked to his right, the bullet grazed right past his face. And I was standing right there when it happened.
Yeah. So that was one of the first things that I noticed too, that it looked like when you looked at it, it's like he moved at the last second. And I'm like, that literally could have saved his life. Matt, you had something?
Well, I was going to say, AP reported yesterday that a police officer did go up on the roof. And I think if that's the case, the AP report yesterday was that a police officer, after being alerted, a police officer or some law enforcement officer went up on that roof. The gunman, Crooks, turned, looked at him, raised his weapon at him. The officer backed down off the roof, and then Crooks turned and immediately fired. And I think that might have saved the president's life as well, or former president's life as well, because this kid actually was a shooter. He had tried out. He didn't make his rifle team, but I tell you what, making a rifle team in Western Pennsylvania is a pretty high order. So that, he was a shooter, as Tony said, as Danny said, as all of us who fired these weapons know, 150 yards, particularly if he had an optical sight on that weapon, some type of anything other than iron sights. That's from the prone position. That's an easy shot. I mean, just to, humble brag here. Last time I qualified with an M4 in the Marine Corps, I shot 8 for 10 at the 500-yard line with an M4 with iron sights. I mean, so these are highly accurate rifles. Anyone with any training, which this kid seems to have had, should have hit Donald Trump. And if this report from the AP is true that a police officer did go up on the roof and distract him and caused him to hurry his shot, that might have saved the president's life as well. But just to get back to the overall aspect of this, the whole fact that there wasn't someone on that roof. How come local law enforcement didn't have to put like their most junior police officer, like the two guys fresh out of the academy? Hey, you two guys stand on that roof in the sweltering sun. Like why that didn't happen? I mean, just the incompetence on that is just overwhelming, and it just absolutely it fuels the conspiracy theories. Because how could it not? How could you not?
Right.
I mean,
Gary, put that diagram back up again if you could.
Yeah. I mean, my mom would know. And I shouldn't say that, be pejorative like that about my mom, but like,
you never give up high ground. Come on, always use the high ground and hold it.
Some of the other vision or views of this are from a lot further back. You see, this is completely wide open area. There's hardly any places where you can get elevated line of sight. That's one of the absolute first ones. So that was the first thing I thought. How would there not have been somebody up there?
And there weren't a ton of buildings. It wasn't like there are 50 buildings around there. Like if you go back out, there's not many other buildings from this photo you're showing now. If you go back out, there are not that many other buildings that would have need to have been covered. So let alone one from that angle. I mean, just on a sense of like, wouldn't you want Overwatch from that angle, looking at looking from the side or the flank of the event? Wouldn't you want someone from that perspective anyway? Like none of this makes sense as to how they could screw this up so royally. I think they did because the Secret Service has shown that they're incompetent over and over and over again. They've had a series of issues, and there's we can get into other aspects too. But yeah, no, this is just the idea that Donald Trump is not dead right now is really astounding.
Absolutely.
Tony, go ahead and say whatever you can say, because I'm about to tell you it's going to get worse.
I did bring up, I want to correct the CNN folks a little bit. So there's a picture of me. I was in the front row. There's Trump pointing over to the chart. He did the same thing at this event, but he did the chart at the very end. This is the very end. And again, you can go to T-Spooky. I'm not trying to get new followers, but you guys can go check them out. I posted them all.
If you want to, that's fine. Yeah.
Go check them out. I mean, they're there and they're on my Facebook. You guys, look, we're all friends. We see these things on our Facebooks. And so these are on there. And so he had the same pose where he almost, got shot. Where this happened in Butler, he was doing this in Virginia. So I dispute what CNN's saying. It's just the timing of it was different. But then that's the next thing I want to follow on to Matt's point. As Matt pointed out rightly, you have, any amateur recognizes that you never give up high ground either in an ambush or when you're looking to defend a position. You never give up the high ground. So that we all agree on that. The second thing is the timing. Okay, this deputy showed up and didn't engage. That's really suspicious because, in a situation like that, you would always engage. And then secondarily, why didn't he just notify the Secret Service saying, I got a guy with a gun, get the principal down, just go tackle Trump. Now, I was invited to be there. Yeah. I was invited to be at this and I couldn't make it. Some of my close friends are from that area in Pennsylvania. I'd already attended the one in Chesapeake. I love President Trump, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to stay outside in 90-degree heat again after I did it for 2 hours in Chesapeake. Thank you very much. But even if I were in the crowd, heard gunshots, you yell gun, and then that gets their attention and they go after Trump. That's how it's supposed to happen. You yell weapon or gun, they're supposed to react instantly to go grab him. So the fact that nobody even did that, based on the fact that people, this kid was, that one redhead guy was drunk talking to the BBC. Well, we were trying to tell him there's a guy with a gun. I mean, that 3 minutes, that 3 minutes now has to be a focus.
That's the other point too. What Tony's saying is so correct here. This breakdown, we'll be generous and call it a breakdown in communications, right? We'll be generous and say that, right? How come the counter sniper team wasn't alerted, right? Why? I mean, you can make the argument that, okay, maybe the counter sniper team saw him, but they couldn't determine if he had a rifle or not, which is complete nonsense because he's 150 yards away. You can tell he's got a rifle. But then when he goes and presents the weapon and he's in the prone, you're telling me they couldn't recognize at that moment that he was. So how come the counter sniper team wasn't already looking at that roof, right? Identified him before he had the opportunity to fire. I mean, and again, we'll be generous and say it's a breakdown in communication, but this is just,
Matt, I'm going to show you some things here that I don't know we can be that generous, because there are some big problems on video on the timing. So let me start off first of all, and Tony, we're going to talk. I actually have that clip from the redhead kid that you were talking about here. But before that, there was another witness here I want to put on that maybe everybody hasn't seen. That talks about something. This is starting to build a case for how long before the first shot everybody should have known. First of all, watch this.
As Trump started, I noticed two officers that were looking for something or somebody. I was looking around myself and seeing a guy on top of one of the buildings go in between one building to the next, and went and told the officer that he was up there. And when I went back to my spot, I heard that people could still see the person from where they were standing. So I checked that out, and I went back to tell the officer that if he came over there, he could see them. And when I turned my back is when the shots started.
Okay, so the timeline I'm going to paint here is more than 3 minutes. So imagine this guy had time to see the shooter as he was going from the previous buildings. Gary, throw that diagram back up there again. I'm not sure. Yeah, you can kind of see, though. You see where the gunman on the far right here. You see that there is an area between the buildings. There's actually another one behind that. So this guy saw the guy going between the buildings. He said he saw some policemen there. He then went and told some policemen, came back, and continued watching. That I don't know for sure how long that part took, but it took a long time. But then that's the first question. Again, we talked about being generous because of lack of communication skills, but that means that there was some cops on the ground. And Tony, can you imagine a situation to where a cop doesn't have some kind of communications gear?
No, I can't. Again, I'm going back to my experience at Chesapeake. And I was there as a guest. I wasn't mixing in with the law enforcement guys, but as one of the special guests, I had full access to everything. I was talking to folks. I always am curious about these things because I'm curious. We all three of us share the curiosity bug, and I was just talking to folks, and they had 5 different jurisdictions plus state patrol plus Secret Service, and they were all in constant communication. They were actually doing things to not only monitor the crowd, they were trying to make sure that certain flow and certain things were done where people weren't allowed to go certain places. I mean, obviously, you want to minimize the amount of space you have to observe and control. So you do that by clearing people out and making sure that they're in a corridor or within a set space that you can kind of monitor them. This was all done very well. And again, maybe because Governor Youngkin was there, you had this great showing. You had Virginia Beach, you had Chesapeake, you had Suffolk, you had State Patrol. I think you had some folks from North Carolina because, a lot of folks from North Carolina were there, plus Secret Service. So it was this, again, overlapping mesh of folks who were working together. So I'm curious to see if there's going to be an after action, because I would want to know who was indeed first off, who had the responsibility for doing the initial search and maintaining the security, and then why weren't these credible observations of civilians followed up on rapidly as a worst case issue. Maybe they were wrong, but you can't afford to be wrong, as we know now. And
Right.
you should have put Trump on the ground and got him out of there. Right?
Right. Okay. So now I'm going to continue on with the timeline here. So that witness I just showed there had however long it was that he did all those things. So this next piece here is going to probably overlap that a little bit on the end. So when he came back and he was still looking, that's where this video from somebody on the ground that's 52 seconds. This is important. Watch how it starts. And let me point out something at the end. I want you to pay attention to, you can hear Trump in the background. At the end, he's going to be talking about lots of criminals coming across the border, et cetera. That's important. So watch this clip, 52 seconds.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on top of the roof. Look. There he is right there. Right there, see him? He's laying down. See him?
Yeah, he's laying down.
Instead, I'm here with you fighting like hell to get a Senate.
What's happening?
And to make sure we take back the White House, because if we do, we're going to make America better than ever before. We're going to make it.
Yeah, look. There he is.
Easy, because we have millions and millions of people in our country that shouldn't be here. Dangerous people. Criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here.
Right on the roof.
It's much tougher than it happens.
You went right on the roof with that.
Okay, so Matt, one of the things I want to touch on, even before I get to the next clip, which is going to put the tag on the how long it was before the final shot was fired, or the first shot was fired, is the fact that all these people are just on the ground. None of these are professional people, and they're looking up and they can see it. But with a camera phone, you can physically see the guy crawling towards his position. And in the very first of that clip, Gary, if you could replay about the first 5 seconds, note that there's a cop on the base of the building. Watch this. Running.
Look, they're all pointing.
The Atlantic, maybe the Pacific.
Yeah, someone's on
Right
top
there.
of the roof.
You
Look.
see that one on the right, sir.
There
So
he is
you
right
see
there.
that the cops were already there. So why is somebody, Matt, not picking up the phone on his uniform and saying, hey, we got a shooter up on the roof here, take some action?
Right. I mean, 'cause that police officer might have been looking for the ladder to get up on the roof kind of deal. I mean, it's not so easy to get up on roofs of buildings, right? There's usually one way to do it. How this kid got up on it, how he got, I mean, all this, everything that leads to this point, how he was able to have access and how, but then once he's on the roof, it's 90 degrees out. No one's going up on that roof for anything other than, mischief or nefarious, right? I mean, like, or to get a bad sunburn, but going up on a hot metal roof, middle of the day, all kinds of stuff, exactly that breakdown, that inability of the law enforcement there on the ground to seemingly communicate with the Secret Service and to do, as Tony was saying, get the president out of there, as well as to make sure that counter sniper team is watching. I don't know what the counter sniper, what their rules of engagement are, but I have to imagine that if they see a rifle present in the presence of the president of the United States, they shoot the person. I can't imagine the rules of engagement or any other. I can imagine if they can't identify a weapon, they hold off. But again, he presents the weapon. And the fact that he's low crawling on top of a metal building in the hot sun in the direction of the president of the United States with a rifle that, even if it's a carbine version, an M4 version, right, is still roughly 2.5 feet long. I mean, how could they not identify that?
Exactly.
So all these questions here, and it's I think maybe some of this you could also look and say the pace of the presidential campaigns, how much this has got to do with complacency and fatigue on the part of the Secret Service, that their people have done so many of these now and nothing ever happens. And so, or just yesterday we had the same kind of thing and it was nobody, the guy was drunk, et cetera, as well as, and then the fatigue, the constant, doing these over and over again. Did that have an effect on this? But, you got to keep coming back that these are professionals. They're supposed to be able to account for that. That by July.
I think we're being generous here to say, fatigue and all this stuff. But
I think we've all done operations. We've all been in combat, and we all know that nothing goes the way you plan it in combat, and that you do like things. I messed up things that I wish I could go back and do. You know, I mean, and my best intentions were not what I did when I was in combat. We all have those experiences, so I think that's why I'm being overly generous here. And I know I'm being overly generous, but yeah. I mean, this whole thing is. I mean, the more we're talking about, the more maddening this appears when you start doing, as Danny, you're showing this timeline, this chain of events. How was this kid able to get these rounds off? And even it wasn't even this question of I want to go back to what Tony keeps saying, why they didn't get the president out of there. That doesn't mean they should have engaged with this young man and shot him dead right away. It's a question of get the president out of there.
Yeah, and it's about to get worse. Okay, so it's going to be even harder to be generous with the next few things I'm going to show here. But so this last piece on the timeline I want to get to, you have the first witness I told you about where he saw him going between the buildings. He had time to go back and forth and get law enforcement. No one was ready to take action, et cetera. Then you had that 52-second piece, and that one ended with Trump talking about there's lots of criminals coming across the border, whatever. So I'm now going to pick up with this speech itself, which we got off C-SPAN. So he's going to pick up with that speech right where it left off. Watch how much longer after that whole 52-second, after that first witness saw it, how much longer it is before the shot comes off. Watch this.
Dangerous people, criminals. We have criminals. We have drug dealers. We have people that should not be here. And it's much tougher than if it happened. We had the strongest border ever. In recorded history, we had the best border. In fact, if they could ever put up a chart, I don't know if they can do it. Do you guys have access to that chart that I love so much? You don't mind if I go off teleprompter, do you? Because these teleprompters are so damn boring, I try and explain that. Oh, there's a, wow. You guys are doing it. They're getting better with time. My guys, take a look at that chart. Take a look at the arrow on the bottom. See the big red arrow, right? So that's when I left office. That was the lowest point, and that comes right from the government services, comes right out of Border Patrol. Take a look at that. So that arrow is the lowest amount of illegal immigration ever in recorded history into our country. And then the worst president in the history of our country took over. And look what happened to our country. Probably 20 million people. And that's a little bit old, that chart. That chart's a couple of months old. And if you want to really see something that's said, take a look at what happened.
So that was an interminably long clip. But
it is. And just I want to give a kudos to you, Danny, and to Gary for putting this together like that, because it really does show exactly how this should have. Going back to Tony's point, why didn't that counter sniper team, who's responsible for Overwatch and surveillance as well, say just that one word that Tony said before? Gun. That's all they had to say.
Exactly.
And they would have gotten the president down.
And part of this, Danny, to carry on with Matt's point, is I was trained as an operative. I mean, we have a spectrum of training. One of the things we're taught, because we're often out by ourselves with minimal, with minimal, like sometimes you're by yourself, you just take the shot to get whatever the threat is off their ability to shoot. So even if they didn't take and shoot the kid, they should have started firing immediately once they saw the weapon and knew it was there, because even if you don't hit him, you then disrupt his aim. Look, we've all been shot at. It gets your attention, and it does throw your ability to shoot off. It does. I'm just telling you. I mean, we all know this. So that's what we're trained to do as operatives within our individual weapons, small arms training. Just pull it out and start shooting. Or if you're in a position where you have a rifle, you start putting down what we call withering fire from a defilade position. You just do it. And clearly they didn't. And as you said, Matt,
Tony, I got to jump on that, because I can assure you, the first time in my life that I came under fire all the way back in Desert Storm as a lieutenant. I thought I was in a secure location, and all of a sudden I hear bullets passing past either side of my head before you hear the actual crack of gunfire. And I assure you that got my attention. So
absolutely,
totally, you're right.
Right.
I get shivers. I get shivers just feeling, going back and feeling that. Yeah, I know. I got like, here we go. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yikes. Yeah. So then again, you have to, the questions just keep piling up here. Now, I want to, Tony, you mentioned this earlier. And for anybody who hadn't seen it yet, this is the crucial part of the redhead kid who was just incredulous at some of these, things that he observed. And it's important to point out here before I show you one other clip after it. Watch this first.
We're pointing at them. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, hey, man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police are like, huh, what? Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, hey, right here on the roof. We can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling. And next thing you know, I'm thinking to myself, why is Trump still speaking? Why have they not pulled him off the stage? I'm standing there pointing at him for 2-3 minutes. Secret Service is looking at us from the top of the barn. I'm pointing at that roof, just standing there like this. And next thing you know, 5 shots ring out.
Okay, now we're starting to get into some of the problems here. We've been talking about before being generous to maybe it was incompetence, they were tired, whatever. But now then you're seeing this kid here who's not hard to see. You can't miss this guy outside. And he says he had contact with the guys on the barn. He was pointing to the roof, telling them what was going on. Now, watch this clip here. This is from a Wall Street Journal thing, specifically about the counter sniper team. Watch this.
At the same time, while Trump speaks, the Secret Service snipers can be seen facing the gunman's direction. We see the agent on the roof pick his head up just before shots ring out at 6:15.
So, Gary, put that picture of that close-up of the counter sniper team back up again. Look at the scope on this guy. I mean, that guy could probably read your watch from a mere 150 meters. And he was clearly looking right at the guy, even at that time. So now then we have to ask some really hard questions. If all the policemen that were out there that we've now identified, the regular policemen there, obviously it stands to reason that, and there's actually no other possibility than that if they're part of the security detail, they have the ability to communicate with someone. So it's impossible to me to think that none of those cops at any point ever radioed back to the headquarters and said, hey, we have a report of a gunman on the building, or I can see him, etc. But these guys on the roof had a direct sign. As you said a second ago, Tony, you can see his weapon with him when he's low crawling to get into position. Or actually, that was Matt that said that. So now that you can see him, there is no justification that I can even think of, and you guys tell me if I'm wrong, to where you could be watch him low crawl into position, see somebody waving up to get your attention, and not take any action. They got a microphone on. They could have talked to anybody, but they didn't take action and they didn't shoot. What's going on with that?
And I'm confused too. I mean, I wasn't, I don't have formal training in this, but I've been around snipers and certainly in Iraq and everything. And they work in pairs, and one has the weapon and one is an observer, and both these guys have weapons. And so, I mean, I'm just speculating here, talking, in a way that I probably shouldn't be talking, but I'm just looking at that surprise that both of those guys, so you have the one who's up on his knees and the other who's in a prone position. It seems to me that one of them should have been acting with an observation. So I don't know. Maybe that's what the guy prone was doing. I'm not sure which one fired. It seems the guy who was kneeling fired, but it just seems to me that things weren't set up to allow for communication to occur.
And Tony, I want to go back to one other aspect of this. Gary, throw that diagram back up one more time, if you would, please. So notice that in the picture there, where those guys were, the counter snipers had their weapons directly trained on the gunman. I mean, they were directly trained. They didn't have to shift around. Those guys, it seems like, would have been up there to scan the whole area because you don't know where the threats are going to come from. But they didn't look to be scanning. And other shots that and earlier in the speech, it didn't look like, they're looking left and right and wanted to make sure here. They are focused expressly on. Yeah, you see that. See, there's stuff around. There's other things they could have been looking at, but they were right on that one thing here. Go back to the picture of the snipers again, Gary. Now, notice how it is on a tripod. It is pointed directly at that. The guy who's in the prone to the right is also expressly pointing there. They're not looking anywhere else. And I think I might have heard that there was one other pair of snipers on another building. I haven't heard that confirmed. But what I do see here is that why are they only looking one direction? And again, I got to ask, if they're looking this direction, why did they take no action, either verbally to warn anyone or to take any shots, as Tony just mentioned? I think that's a fair question. Tony, to you first.
So yeah, let's break this down again and factually. I think the three of us can agree, based on our military experience, that Overwatch is Overwatch. You do Overwatch around an entire area, and maybe they had sectors they were looking at, maybe not. I don't know. But the idea that you have two individuals focused on one single spot when you might have multiple threats. Remember, my presumption would always be, if there may be more than that guy, there may be other folks who are in positions right now that we don't see. We need to be vigilant. So yeah, you track the threat you have, but then you presume there's probably things going on over here that you don't know about, and you start looking. So that's the first thing. It's like, why weren't they looking other places? And I think that's a question that's worth exploring, maybe in a second show when we talk about this when more details are presented, because that's never done. Now, I actually have done this, believe it or not. I know this probably comes as a shock to both of you. Sheriff Dave Decatur, my boss in Virginia, I'm his Homeland Security advisor, actually assigned me to a detail, a personal protection detail of Governor Terry McAuliffe. I was actually on the detail. I was actually armed as a member of the detail, going around with the governor in Stafford County. So I've seen how you focus on a principle and you move it. And when you go from location to location, you put out a screen that's beyond the essential space of the vehicles. So applying the basic concept, which I was part of, to this scenario, you always have to be looking out beyond where you're at for targets. And then the next point I wanted to touch on, is a long way to getting, is rules of engagement. What were the rules of engagement? What can an individual on that law enforcement detail, it's a detail, I mean, this is a mission, whatever you want to call it. We've all three of us have had rules of engagement assigned to us in combat. So the same thing in Secret Service. What were those rules of engagement? And frankly, that's one of the first things they need to cough up.
Yeah.
Were the rules of engagement? Because that's going to tell you a great deal about, were those actions of the snipers legit or inappropriate regarding that delay, that obvious
massive delay
in action. Yeah. So
and Matt, I want to ask you, I want to focus back on the communications issue here. I'm going to show a clip in just a second here, where some of the other experts have been going on other television networks and, saying, hey, there was no communications plan here. Again, whether you want to be generous or speculate other things, can you come up with any kind of rational reason why the number of policemen that these witnesses that we've just shown you said that they talked to, that no one would have gotten on a radio? What could have been going on there?
I mean, you could have issue where maybe local law enforcement's radios didn't work with the Secret Service radios. The people weren't, the local law enforcement weren't trained to know how to do whatever, change the, change the frequency, or, I mean, you can come up with all types of reasons why they wouldn't have been able to talk. But again, you're talking about the Secret Service, you're talking about professional law enforcement at state and local levels. This is all things that they should have been able to overcome. Communication breakdowns, you have reasons why we have multiple modes of communications, both in the military and emergency services. I have multiple modes of communication in my home. We all do. You can contact me via Twitter. You can contact me via Instagram. You can send me an email. You can call me on my phone, right? I mean, like, there are all types of ways for us to communicate in our own personal lives, let alone organizations and institutions like the Secret Service, the Pennsylvania State Police, County Sheriff, Butler Police Department, all these agencies that would have been there. So I just don't understand why there was an inability to communicate, and particularly from looking at those photos of the counter sniper team on the roof, looking at the roof, they were alerted to it. They seemed like they were fixated on it and were observing the threat. So why then the breakdowns need to be internal to the Secret Service? So the idea that it was the local law enforcement not communicating to the Secret Service, there was a breakdown. The guy that was supposed to tell the Secret Service, he was in the Porta-John at the time, or whatever, the reason was, no, it appears as if the Secret Service in that video, especially there, recognized the threat. So why, again, gets back to this whole point, why the breakdown? Why wasn't he pulled off the stage? You could always bring him back up on the stage. The thing that we're fluxed here is by just how nonsensical this is, how this just doesn't make any sense. If we were all watching a movie and this occurred in the movie, the three of us, and I think everyone else watching, would say, that's so unbelievable.
It's so unrealistic. It would never happen like that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And we would turn it off, right?
Yeah.
So, but truth, stranger than fiction. I don't know.
Okay, so all right, so that's what's happened. I actually won't show the one about communication because it just reiterates what we've been saying here already. Let's change this topic here a little bit. Let's use some of our analytical capacity here to look at the ramifications and the implications of what some of this could mean, because either this was the most profound, incompetent entire team that can even be fathomed at this level, or there was something else at play here. And you hate to even say this out loud, but Tony, you said at the outset of this show that, there was somebody. It's not just this unlikely that it was just one solid kid that was involved here, this 20-year-old, and it could have come from a number of other places, but one cannot dismiss the possibility that the evidence is saying it almost looks like somebody on the team was intentionally not taking him out at the time. Is that an unfair thing to say, or do you have concerns?
No, so let's go through and speak factually based on what you and Gary have shown us today. Let's start with the moment that bullet went through Trump's upper ear. That bullet was fired by the perpetrator, and at least I think three to five total from him, with ample time of the Secret Service to have shot him before those shots were fired. Right? You saw the video. They were looking at him and they shot, and Trump gets zinged, but Trump would have been dead had that bullet moved half an inch. So you got to ask yourself, going back to the rules of engagement, what were the rules of engagement exactly? And then why was that delay? And that delay then becomes the issue. Was the delay because of lack of training, because the rules of engagement were such that the officers failed to act based on what they thought was their legal obligation, or was it something worse? That's what we're left with right now, as far as I'm concerned. And because Trump was shot, he survived. There's a delay. We have ample video, eyewitness evidence that the Secret Service failed. The question becomes, why did they fail?
Right. That is the big question. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of criticism that's occurring right now that is extremely justified and necessary. I mean, there's even criticism coming about the physical stature of the Secret Service agents. If you look and you see when they're trying to protect Trump, the female agents are not tall enough to protect or shield the president. They're not. Right. Trump's a big guy. Trump is what, 6'2", 6'3". He's a tall guy. But the reality is that the Secret Service is supposed to be able to physically shield the president. And you see when they get him up, he's not shielded. If there was a second shooter, which and I agree. Tony made this point earlier. Of course, the detail protecting the president has to be aware that there might be a second. This may have been the first attack, and there be a distraction essentially, and then the real attack comes from another source, or there's the second shooter, or whatever. The president was exposed because, particularly, the agent who was facing the crowd, she was not tall enough to protect the president. The photo that is iconic, and this photo that the Trump campaign couldn't dream of ever getting of him, right? I mean, like, you see, it's only possible because that one Secret Service agent is not tall enough to shield him. I mean, so there's all types
that one right
of
there that Gary's showing.
Yeah, there's all types of other questions here, I think, that go into the competency of, but I think this is mirrored in other ways too throughout a host of our organizations at the federal level in terms of their incompetence. I mean, just look, just the Secret Service, is this the equivalent of the pier the American military just built off of Gaza, right? I mean, like,
exactly,
right? I mean,
well stated, Matt. Well stated.
Just how poor overall our government works, particularly on the military law enforcement side. And there's a decay, there's a decline, there's a corruption. I would argue they're fat and happy. These agencies, these institutions, they're all on the gravy train with biscuit wheels, right? Everyone, I mean, Pentagon gets $1 trillion a year, but we can't win a war. I mean, so the Secret Service gets how much, and what's going to happen? The Secret Service is going to get how much more money after this, right? That's coming. I think there's a lot of bigger questions that go beyond what we're talking about here.
Yeah. And Matt, I actually have another question here. Gary, could I get you to in that same little side box that you were just using, if you could bring up the very first video, the one that we used as a cold open that we didn't play all of, but let the thing continue to play, because there's something that happens here that I'd like to ask Tony, especially since he's done these kinds of things before, because something it just doesn't seem right about the way they conducted themselves. So what you'll see, and I think this the clip Gary's going to bring up here in a second, is okay. So obviously Trump's here talking, and okay, now then the shot is fired. You see the people, they immediately run up and get on top of him. Okay, that's normal. But now then, watch how much time passes by here before anybody goes anywhere. I watched the videotaped that was captured of the attempted assassination of the Prime Minister of Slovakia, Fico, in May. And what happened there is what I've seen in many, many other types of events. When something happens, they whisk the guy out there immediately. They just grab him and rush him off the stage. Why is, even now, as the video's still rolling, he's still standing there? Why have they not gotten him off the stage? Can you explain that?
Well, I can't, because the first thing I would have thought, again, I having been in a law enforcement personal protection role based on how we did it, no, if something had happened, McAuliffe would have been on the ground with people on top of him, and then moved, with big, I mean, everybody on the detail was bigger than me. These guys were 6'4". No, I'm sorry, no females in the detail. And their job was to protect the principal, to get him out of danger, period, and do it rapidly. So based on what I've seen regarding my direct law enforcement experience, it's not done this way. This looks like the Keystone Cops. It looks like they did it for the first time. This looks like something you would do at the academy when you're trying to figure it out, not professionally. Now, I'm going to say a couple things that may be controversial. I don't think that maybe they thought they were going to have to ever take Trump off stage. You can take that any way you want.
Yeah,
I don't.
I'll just admit, I've never been on any of these kind of details. I just know the ones I've seen.
I'm going to say that. Leave it out there. But the second thing I want to say, Danny, for that guard, why weren't they actually? I want to know what was going on with those guys after they shot the sniper. Did they then recalibrate and start looking around for other threats? Did they, or did they know? Did they know that was the only threat?
Yeah,
that is a question that I had as well, and unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any video of what they did afterwards.
Exactly.
Exactly. Even those the guys with the rifles in their hands that you saw on the stage there. even that was a little odd to me because you don't see them. I mean, I would have expected almost them to be scanning and looking around, but they don't seem to be doing that.
Again, my experience is you move as a unit. Once something happens, you act as a unit. It's all rehearsed. You all know your positions and you know where to go. You're not screwing around with your sunglasses. You're not trying to put your weapon away and do all the other crap. That's unprofessional, and it's not done like that. I'm just telling you from my own experience, that stuff in a thing like that, it's all very rehearsed.
See, look at this guy on the right side of the screen there. He's not even looking out. He's looking back. He's constantly looking at Trump. Right. You're supposed to be out there looking for threats, but he's not doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, my experience, I don't have any experience as protective detail, but I've been both in Iraq protected. So in Iraq, I had private security as a member of the U.S. Embassy, where I was the principal, and the same in Afghanistan, where I had a military protective detail. And we rehearsed. I mean, like,
exactly.
And it was just that simple. Absolutely. That, like, I knew what I was supposed to do. And I'll say Trump seemed to have been well prepared to drop to the ground when he realized he'd been shot. It takes you a moment to realize what's occurring. And then as soon as he did, he reacted and he dropped to the ground. The Secret Service didn't pull him down. He dropped himself, and then they covered on him, right? But then you're supposed to have rehearsed all this. And yeah, the president's not going to rehearse this every stop, but there should have been the detail should. And it does. It kind of comes across as like maybe these guys hadn't rehearsed that day, let alone with.
I'd say it was longer than that day, Matt.
But like, but yeah, as someone who has been on the position of being the principal, of being the protectee, this is something that you're taught what to do. You're told what to do, and then you just follow the motions. You're literally just taught to obey. Like, okay, you follow, and you have one person you listen to, the head of your detail, and you follow his instructions. He is right next to you. He's the one who's holding you, essentially, and you move with them, and you do everything. That's all you do is you listen and you follow what they say, and they've rehearsed everything. And so it's easy as a principal because you just follow the instructions. It's scary. It's you don't know what's going on. And particularly if you're in case like that and being protected, you really have a diminishment of your senses. Trump had the political sense to stick his head out. And again, we watched that video and you could see the stature of that Secret Service agent where Trump's face is fully exposed. If there had been another shooter who was perpendicular to the stage, they would, so how was this, was this ever rehearsed with the president and recognizing that, okay, and that agent, she may be top notch. She may be the best person they have. And I wouldn't want to get in a fist fight with her. She'd probably kick my ass. I'm sure she would. She's trained for it. She's younger than I am, probably stronger than I am. I'm, this like middle-aged, like, on and on. But like, but how come that wasn't identified before? So as we go through this, you start pulling out pieces of like, okay, why wasn't this prepared for? Why wasn't this done? Why wasn't this identified? What type of rehearsals, not just of getting the president off the stage, what type of rehearsals were done with local law enforcement to ensure communication was good? But I think we've kind of, we've beaten that horse enough.
Yeah.
And in fact,
sorry, go ahead, Tony.
To carry on Matt's point is like, when you're the principal, I mean, you've been the principal. I've been one of the guys that, protecting the principal. Matt, you basically have a limited number of seconds to get the hell out of what potentially could be a kill zone. So you don't sit there and kind of shuffle him up and make sure you just dust him off a little bit. Gee, it's time for apple fritters. We better go to Dunkin' Donuts and we'll get back to the task. I mean, it was that gradual. It wasn't rapid. It wasn't 1001, 1002, 1003.
Right. That's what
we're out
as well. Yeah. And I again, so many of these things, we need to know what is their standing operated procedure.
Look at that. They're just standing there.
I know it. What are their rules of engagement? All these things. Yeah, I want to see one of those. In the amount of time we have left, I want to shift gears to it in a different direction on this. And by the way, we're going to continue to track this stuff. And I'd love to have you guys both back on as we get more information and we get answers to some of these, and we'll see how that works out. But let's look at the political ramifications of this. And first of all, I want to look at this from the Democratic side. What is this going to mean for the Biden campaign? Because one of the things that I've seen this morning already has said that almost certainly this is going to end any possibility, any talk in the Democratic side of replacing Biden. They said that's now then they're just not going to go there. They think it would be a political loser. I'm not sure that that's going to be a political winner, though. First of all, let's go to you, Matt. How do you view this as affecting the the Biden campaign?
Oh, it certainly is disastrous for the campaign. A campaign that was already failing. And now, again, I'm being generous again. I'm being too polite here, but failing. But a campaign, and this is Tony's point before about the conspiracy theories. Why would Trump in his campaign stage this when he's already winning? Just in that alone. But I mean, certainly the idea of presenting that image of Trump. The one photo from the AP where he is surrounded by the detail, he's got his fist in the air, he's got blood on his face, the determination, the look of determination, and then he's got the American flag behind him, like Jesus hanging there on the cross, basically.
Man.
You couldn't have gotten a better photo.
Oh,
and I can understand why people say it's staged because it is so iconic. I mean, it is, but you contrast that with a doddering President Joe Biden, a man who is clear to us entering into some degree of senility and dementia. You put those two up there, and this is a complete disaster for the Biden campaign. And I think what you'll see is those Democrats who have been opposing Biden, because I've seen the same things today, Danny, the Democrats saying we're not going to oppose Biden anymore. We're going to go along with it. It's not worth the fight, or exactly saying that it's not worth the fight. It's over. Let's just all focus on 2028 now.
Okay, Tony, over to you. Now, let's look at that again, sticking with the Democratic side. Give me the pros and cons of doing what they claim that they're going to do, that they're ending the talk about, say, for example, elevating Kamala Harris to the top of the ticket or Gavin Newsom, whoever else, it doesn't matter. What are the pros and cons of keeping Biden in versus replacing him, and how does this all affect the Democrat side?
Well, let me just say, Danny, I'm on Team Joe. Just saying, you go, Joe. I'm all for it. Thank you. And I actually am.
I always suspected that about you. I got to say.
I know. I've come out of the closet. Plus, I'm a Druid, and I actually enjoy sky-clad ceremonies of naked women dancing around fires too. But I'm digressing.
Yeah, we digress. Yeah, let's don't digress.
Need to get back on topic. Sorry. Anyway, my point being, boy, wouldn't that raise the ratings if they did that in Milwaukee? Sky-clad women around fire. But anyway, we don't want to go there. So anyway, but my point being is, I'm being a bit over the top on this, but no, Joe Biden, they have what was that term? You reap what you sow. They've sown this. They as Matt said in the beginning, look, they've been demonizing Trump for years, and then finally something bad happens. You're surprised by that? I mean, come on. You've created the conditions for the level of hate necessary to achieve the outcome we see, period. So I think the wiser folks at the DNC have recognized that anybody else you throw in there to potentially take Joe Biden to take his place, they're going to be collateral damage. That the damage is just going to get worse from here. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're going to just let Joe be Joe, and Kamala. I don't think anybody wants Kamala on their side, to be honest. Maybe Matt knows more about this than I do, but I don't think they want Kamala. I think that's the last thing they want. So right. I don't think they're going to try to shift horses, so to speak, from Joe to Kamala.
So if what you say is correct, if they are saying, hey, 24 is over, let's start looking at 28, then I guess it actually does make some sense to say, let Biden keep taking all the slings and arrows the rest of the way through, as opposed to tarnishing anyone else.
Yeah. Look, he's the sacrificial lamb, I think, at this point. As much as had this not happened, we would be having a very different discussion about policy right now. We'd be talking about the faux pas of Biden calling Zelensky Putin, really? and calling Vice President Trump, Vice President Harris, Vice President Trump. We'd be talking about that. And of course, the fact that Ukraine walked away with another bundle of cash from NATO. I mean, I think we three would have a great. And I recommend if the folks watching us now hasn't gone out and watched Danny's video outlining this, you need to do it because it is brilliant. I'm not saying it because you're my friend. It is truly brilliant, and I know our friends in Europe are going to have taken note of it already. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other thing too, if you give up Biden, if you let Biden go through with this now, and you know this whole aspect of don't tarnish someone else, as you guys just said, right? So not only you're also not saddling whoever your prime candidate is for 28 with the inflation.
Yeah.
You're not saddling them with Gaza. You're not saddling them with losing Roe v. Wade. Wow. I mean, this is all stuff that a Democrat, you know, they don't have to campaign on. That was Joe Biden's fault. You know, I think the big hesitation, one of the big hesitations you're seeing is that this is Biden is part of the Clinton-Obama camp, right? It's the Clinton-Obama clique that Biden is a part of. And it's those people who are grasping at power now, those who are pushing for someone else to replace him. They all represent factions in the Democratic Party that are not especially a part of the Clinton-Obama-Biden dynasty, if you will.
Right.
That's what we're seeing here is a change in power within the Democratic Party. So the smart thing for them to do is, of course, to sit this out.
Fascinating.
This puts the knife into the Clinton, Obama, Biden camp, and it allows for the next generation, whoever that's going to be, Newsom, et cetera, Newsom, Whitmer, whoever, to be the new power faction.
So now let's shift to the other side. Let's look at this now. I know, Tony, I know you're a Joe guy, so you may not be a good one to talk about this, but let's look at the Republican side. So obviously Milwaukee's coming up this week. So it was already going to be a big ratings hit for the Trump team anyway. Now that on top of this, I can imagine there's probably going to be, maybe the biggest audience ever for the nominee's speech coming up at the end of this week, because everybody's going to want to know what he's going to say when he accepts the nomination. What happened to the Republican Party here?
So, well, we have a problem in the Republican Party where we have a bifurcation, much like the left does. And I'm not going to speak for Matt, but I wanted to comment on my observation. I can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but we have a problem by the fact that you have the establishment Republicans, the rhinos, who really do want to have they're allied with the Obama Biden folks, so they're very happy, throwing more money at Ukraine. They benefit from it. It's just that right now we don't have it. It's not as obvious. The neocons are not welcome in our party, and the neocons and the neolibs, I think, on the left, represented by the Biden folks, have been in control of the party in the left for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, I'm not going to speak for Matt, but I want him to comment on it. I think there were conscientious, well-meaning, good-hearted folks like Matt on the left who really did believe in the principles of the party, but those who believe in those principles are not the ones in charge. And it's the opposite in the Republican Party right now. Those of us who are populists, I don't know if you want to use it as popular. I'm a libertarian, but we are the ones on the ascent right now. You guys know I advised Trump. I talked to him, and I was a national security advisor to Trump 2020. So the neocons are being depressed. Those who are allied naturally with the Obamas, with the Bidens, with the Clintons are being diminished. But it doesn't change the fact they're going to try to make some very strong statements. I mean, I'm kind of surprised. Nikki Haley, neocon Nikki, she's kind of trying to be somewhat reasonable. I've seen some other voices. I don't want to get too specific here. I'll get in trouble because I'll be yelled at, just saying. But I think there's some voices on the conservative side who need to be suppressed. And because they represent that.
By the way, Tony, I got notice actually just a few minutes ago from a source who has some level of history of being right on some things in the Republican Party, claiming that there's actually a shot that Nikki's going to be the VP announcement later today.
No.
Man, I hope you're right, but this person's got a good track record. I'm worried about it.
No, don't worry about it.
Are you saying that with your heart, or because you don't think they're going to do it?
It's not going to happen. I have a pretty good sense of who he's picked, and I can't say, but it's not Nikki. So just saying.
May you be right.
One of my thoughts relating to all this has been that, my God, if this kid had been successful, Nikki Haley most likely would have been the nominee. and then we would have been in a war with China and or Russia. Like Nikki Haley, the worst of all possible things. And Nikki Haley nomination would be something that would make me, consider voting for the Democrat. I'm not going to, but like that's how bad Nikki Haley is. I mean,
I want to say this too. Matt was badly mauled when he was running for office. I'm running for office locally here too as county commissioner, and as someone who believes that we should have a democratic process to have a discussion. And the Democrats in North Carolina are vicious. They wouldn't even, and Matt, remember, we talked about this. They wouldn't even let anybody vote on Biden. They basically said, oh yeah, we're not going to have a primary. Thanks.
But they're also, but in that, and this, I think, a Democratic Party writ large, and this is something for Republicans to be concerned of, could be wary of, cognizant of, in their arrogance, in their sense of entitlement, how quickly they'll defend themselves, they find their own incompetence. So if they didn't have Roy Cooper, they wouldn't have won a statewide election in 20 some odd years or something like that. I mean, the Democratic Party here in North Carolina is incredibly incompetent. With regards to the Republicans, I think what Tony was saying was so correct. You have this bifurcation in both parties. Although what I saw happen with the Democratic Party was, and this shows the incompetence of the progressives in the Democratic Party, Bernie Sanders, AOC, and others, the way that they are trying to attach their policies to the Biden campaign now. So what happened last week was Joe Biden's campaign came out with a number of progressive policies, one of them being, say, canceling all medical debt. The idea being is that Sanders and the progressives are seeing in the Biden campaign's weakness a willingness for the Biden campaign to now take on progressive things to stop the bleeding, right? So that if we offer progressive policies, maybe that will stop the bleed out we have over Gaza, say, especially.
Yeah.
And it's a terrible decision by the progressives. It's short-sighted. It attaches their policies to a losing campaign. It's going to allow the conservatives and the centrists within the Democratic Party, to say that Biden lost because of progressive policies. So, you see this poor strategic decision-making over and over and over again within the Democratic Party. The Republican Party, going forward, it'll be interesting to see who he does select as a vice president. God, I hope not. It's Nikki Haley, but there's already been, I think, enough things that would suggest that. And Tony, please correct me if I'm wrong, that you're looking at having some neoconservatives possibly within a second Trump cabinet, a Tom Cotton maybe, or someone like that. So, I mean, chasing these snakes fully out of DC I think is very far away.
So we should have a separate discussion on this, because we could talk about this gentleman for another hour. Let me say that, Matt, you are correct. But we need to. I think it's much more complicated than you understand, because some of us may have spoken to President Trump about some of this, maybe. And I can't get in a lot of detail, but I think he recognizes the dangers of the neocons. I'll put it that way. But with that said, the neocons still control a wide swath of the Republican Party. So I think he learned some lessons from last time. I have to be careful what I say, because I have some things I want to say to him later on down the road. But I am not a neocon. You guys know I'm a Reagan guy, and I don't believe in the unlimited spending. Matt, we've talked about this. I'm for an effective, not expensive defense. I think we all recognize the American people are being lied to on a daily basis by both sides. And that's something that I think we should all focus on. And I'd like to believe Trump's going to be wiser than he was last time. Just saying.
Well, let's certainly hope that way. And listen, I know we've gone on a little bit longer than normal today, but this is a really, really unusual and critical situation. So we had to give it some extra time to really thoroughly cover it. But I'm really grateful for both of you guys coming on. Some terrific conversation here and great ideas. And would love to have you guys both back on once, in 4 or 5 days, once we get some more answers to some of these questions we have. And we'll see if those answers make any sense. But in the meantime, I appreciate you guys sticking with us here. At 4 o'clock this afternoon, we're actually going to have another show on today where we're going to look at something that Tony mentioned earlier, and that's the pier from hell that we disastrously fell apart in Gaza. So we have some folks that are going to help us take a look at that. A new person here from Defense Priorities, Alex Legolas. So come back and join us at 4 o'clock if you have the time. We'd love to have you back on here. Be sure and like and subscribe and share this with your friends, folks. The analysis you get here, you just don't get anywhere else. Thank you very much, and we'll see you this afternoon on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.